Hello and welcome to the main section of this course. So in this lecture here we're going to look at something called variables. So to do that I'm just going to delete what I've already got there. In fact, just something else to show in code as well. In Swift code you can write some comments, which means when the playground compiles it doesn't include those comments, so it's just like a personal notes written within code. So to do that it's just double slash and it should go green. So I'll just use that really here just to write a title. So variables, that means that bit of code won't run now there because it's got the double slash there as a comment. So variables and constants, well, these are really a fundamental part of any programming language, and really what a variable is, it's just something that holds a bit of information, if that makes any sense. So throughout this course I'm going to try and use an example of a simple logging screen to show you all these different aspects of code. So, variables, ifs, loops, and things like that as we go through the course. I'm going to try and show you it in the real world by a simple log-on screen. So remember, if you log into something, a website, Amazon or something, eBay, it's usually username and password, and then you click the logging button. So, we'll make a start with that example now, really. We'll create our first variable. So to create a variable in Swift, it is simply, as you can see there, var. And as you type up, you get this little drop-down menu of options. As it says there, it is a var declaration. So we'll type in var, then you have to call the variable something. So in this case, I'm going to call it password, ready for our login screen. And then you've got to set it to something. So I'm going to set the password to the word hello. And there you go. And you can see it changes colour now, so password is now declared as a variable. And that is what a variable is. It's now a variable entitled password, and it's holding that piece of information, which is the password, and the password is hello. Now, with it being a variable, obviously that can change. So you can change variables. So, for example, you could do this, and this is the wrong way to do it, by the way. So, say you wanted to change your password from hello to goodbye. You might think this is the right way to do it, but that probably will throw up an error, and it has, look, invalid redeclaration of password, because when you type in var at the start here, you're actually declaring what the variable is. So you've already actually created that variable called password. So when it runs this line of code again, it's saying, well, hang on a second, you're trying to declare another variable called password. That's not right. So to change the variable, you just don't need that var. You're just not declaring it. So here, now look, we've declared that variable called password, hello. Now I've changed that password to goodbye. In fact, if we open up the console at the bottom and play the playground, hopefully we should see that outputted there. So you can see on the right hand side there, hello was the original variable. Now I've changed that variable password to goodbye. Now there's two ways to declare a variable. So just on there, var for var. There's also one called let. So you can see there, a let declaration. So we're going to put here, this time let's username. So we had password before, now I'm going to use username. I'm just going to put Appy there for myself. So that's now declared that. Again, sorry, I haven't put the equal sign in there. I thought it looked wrong when I wrote that. So let username equals Appy. And you can see the username then changes to that little teal blue type colour, so that's set correctly. Now the thing is with a let cannot change. So if we decided to change that, so let's say username equals something else, like Appy teacher, want to change it to that, it should again throw up another error now, and it has. Cannot assign to value username. It's a let constant. So whenever we declare a variable by using let, it means that bit cannot change. It's set throughout the whole program and it can't change. So that's why we can't change it there. So if you wanted to change it, of course, you'll just change that back to a variable, and hopefully then that error should then go, and it has, look. So again, if you play the playground, it's set to Appy and it changes to Appy teacher. So that's a quick introduction there into variables. So var declares it, then you either put username or password in to actually call that variable something, and then actually set it to a value. And if it's never going to change, you can use let instead. And as you write apps in Xcode, you'll see that Xcode often throw it up, saying you've not actually used this anywhere else, so can we change it to let? And I think it just frees up some memory or something. So it's a good habit to get into to use the right one. So that's var and let. So really we've looked at this side here, this side of the equal, I should say, of the variable, how those different types are there. This part now we're going to look at different types of variable on this end of the equal. So we've also got var username equals Appy. In fact, we'll just change that now. Let's change that just to simply to a name. So name's not going to change, we'll use let. So let name equals Michael. So what we have here on this side then, we've got two speech marks. So that means it's a string. So basically what a string is, it's just a collection of characters. So it can be letters, it can be numbers, it can be special characters, whatever it is. When it's between two speech marks, it's called a string. That's a string variable. Now the good thing about strings is we can combine strings as well. So let's just try this. So we can type in here print like we did at the very start when we printed hello world. And you can actually print the variable or the let name here. So you can just type in name. Then you can type in as plus. And then you want to put the rest in speech marks. So if you put a speech mark and another speech mark there, and we're going to type in here, comma, and you'll see why in a moment, you have successfully logged in. A nice little exclamation mark there as well. So let's just play that. And hopefully you get a nice message at the bottom of the screen here. Michael, you have successfully logged in. So I'll put that comma there just to make it the sentence structure work in English grammar. So basically we've got a variable here called a name called Michael. We've now actually used that information now in an actual sentence. So we've put whatever the name is. So we haven't typed in print Michael, you're successfully logged in. We've typed in print name, the variable. So again, if you now to change this to Peter here, then the whole sentence should change to Peter, you're successfully logged in, because we've used that variable name. So that's basically a string. So it's between two speech marks, and it's just a collection of characters. So what I'm going to show you now then is something called an integer. So if we just delete that, in fact I'll use my double comment slash here, just to show you that. So again, integer this time. And basically what an integer is, it's just a whole number. So rather than being a string between speech marks, it's now just a number. And it's the same way to declare it. You can use var or let. So this time we'll use a passcode, because they're usually numbers, aren't they? We'll put the passcode to 100. So that's now created a variable called passcode, and it's now set to a number 100. So no speech marks, it's not a string, it's now a whole number. Now the good thing about this is we can actually do some math on this basically. So if we were to write in now print passcode, and then you say you wanted to multiply it by 2, so use the asterisk for multiplication and 2, then hopefully when we run this again, it should say it's printed 200. So yeah, so 100 times 2 equals 200. Now you can also change the value again of a integer variable, but obviously only if this is declared as var and not let. So to do that, same way as before really, so you wouldn't put var passcode again, you'd just put passcode equals, and we're just going to put passcode plus 1. So in effect, the passcode should now be 101, and let's see what it outputs here, and it has done there on the right hand side, not at the bottom because we're not printing anything, we've just changed that passcode there, so it's now 101. Now if you remember, integers, as I mentioned, they are whole numbers, so if we're going to do something like this, print passcode divided by 50, so that's a slash for divided by. So remember our passcode value now is 101, so basically it's 101 divided by 50. Now let's see here what that outputs at. And it's going to put here, look, 2. Now that's not quite correct, is it? Because 101 divided by 50 is actually 2.02, if you're good at maths there. So what Xcode does, what Swift does with an integer, it just rounds it up or down to the nearest whole number. So 2.02 therefore becomes 2, which mathematically is not quite correct. So if you're building an app where you do need mathematical accuracy, basically decimal places, don't use an integer. We'll show you in a moment what to use instead of that. But one last thing to show you for integers is this, is that you can print an integer into a string. Let's just get rid of all that again. In fact, we'll declare another string here. So let's just put let's name equals Michael again. So now I have a passcode of 100 and a name called Michael, and you can put them together. So it's print like before, open bracket, and then we'll use the variable name here for my name, so name, and then plus, then we want to put the rest of it in speech marks. So we're going to put a speech mark and a speech mark, go back in there, we're going to press space first of all, so the name's separated from the rest of it. So it should say Michael space, and then put my passcode is. Now to put the passcode into this string, this is another way of doing it. You can use the backslash and then put the name of that variable in brackets. So passcode, make sure you don't forget to put the close bracket in there, and hopefully that should work. So again, it's just getting used to the syntax of Swift really, when to use speech marks and brackets and things like that. But again, if you just press the play button down here again, hopefully it'll say Michael, my passcode is 100. So basically we'll put there a string and a integer into one sentence, and then just printed that to the console. So that's how you would do that. Now if you wanted to do something with a bit more accuracy mathematically, then we don't use integer, we use something called a double. In fact, let me just delete all that and write up double up here. In fact, we'll write double and floats. I'll explain why in a moment. So to declare a double, I can't really think of an example on a logging screen when you do decimal places. So let's use pay rise here instead. So let pay rise from your employer be 3.25%. Now, the interesting thing about Swift is, when you declare something, it'll automatically assign a type to it, a variable type. So we've created a declaration var, we've called it pay rise, and we've set that equal to the value of 3.25. Now, because we've used a decimal place here, and it's 3.25, Swift knows this is something called a double rather than an integer. So, again, for example, when you use let name equals Michael, because you've put that into speech marks, Swift knows that is a string. So that's how you can do that. But you can define a type if you wish. So if you wanted to be very specific for Swift and say, look, I want to use a specific variable type, this is how you do it. So in fact, we'll just go up here and just comment that out, so we're not declaring the same thing again. So var pay rise, and then you use a colon, and you can actually type what you want, so double. And as you notice there, when you start writing it, that drop down menu comes down here, and at the bottom here it tells you what it is. So a double precision floating point value type. So that's what a double is in Swift. And then again you just put the same again, 3.25. So rather than letting Swift decide, well that's a double, you've actually declared that as a double yourself. Now what we're going to do here, we're going to put another one here, so we're going to put another pay rise. So you've got a very good boss here who likes to give you lots of pay rises. And this time I'm going to use colon again, and this time I'm going to use something called a float. So again, a float is a single precision floating point type value. And let's just set that to, I don't know, 4.75. Maths on this, then you'd probably think, well, just print then basically pay rise multiplied, so use the asterisk symbol there, by another pay rise. By the way, once you've declared a variable, as you can see, it'll bring up this this handy drop-down menu. So it says look, float another pay rise. So you can also fill it basically rather than having to type out every time. Just press enter on your keyboard and that'll do that. So you think that'll probably work, but hopefully you'll see it brings up an error there. And it's saying, look, this asterisk here, you're trying to multiply something, but it cannot be applied to operands of type double and float. So the one is basically saying, look, because you've got a type variable double and a type variable float, and because of different types, I can't do any maths on them. I can't multiply them together. So to get around that, and that will just delete that, you can convert it. So another skill here. So print bracket, then type in the word double, then another bracket, and we'll type in another pay rise here. So basically what it's now doing is, that's now looking at this variable called another pay rise, which is a float, and it's going to convert it now to a double. So now I can put in multiplied by pay rise, and hopefully that should now work. So if we press the play button again, in fact I have no idea what is 3.25 multiplied by 4.75, but as you can see there, it's come up with 15.4375. So like before when we use integers, it only brought up the whole number. So 101 divided by 50, it said it was 2, but now we can use proper maths here because we're actually using doubles here, so it brings up more accurately to 15.4375. Now one last thing to show you here is, which I haven't shown you before actually, is this variable called another pay rise. You'll notice I've used a capital P for pay rise. Now this is very, very important when you're writing code, especially in Swift, is that when you're writing or declaring things like variables that have multiple words in them, like another pay rise, 2 words, the first word is always lowercase letter, so as in a single word, pay rise, lowercase p, a variable here, another, again lowercase a, but any subsequent word, so if you have 3 or 4 words here, they should always start with a capital letter. So the first one's always lowercase, the other one's always uppercase. It's basically just an etiquette really in coding, and it just makes it easier for other people to see exactly what it is, like it's a variable and things like that, because you've used this correct sentence convention. So just a little thing just to remember there for the future. So the last one I want to show you here is, we'll just delete all that, and we're going to show you something called a Boolean value. In fact, if you go to on the internet, and I've got it open here into Wikipedia, if you search for a man called George Boole, you'll see he's an English mathematician, and he basically invented a Boolean algebra, and that's basically used in most programming languages around the world. Now I've showed you this just for a reason, and basically it's this, that he was born here in Lincoln, Lincolnshire, and that's basically where I'm from now. That's where this video has been recorded from, and you can see his house here and school at 3 Potter Gate. Well, that's about a 5-minute walk from where I'm recording this, so a little bit of history there in this lesson, but not really important, but that's where Boolean algebra comes from, a man called George Boole. Now, Boolean algebra basically is, in Swift, it's basically saying something is true or false. So let's just do that. So let's say, well, someone's put their password in, so let login equals true. And there you go, that login is now true. Or you can say let login equals false, and they can do something like, say, brings up a message saying, look, the login's false, so you don't have entry to the system. So basically that's what Boolean is in its simplest form for Swift. It's just saying if something that's true or false. It's quite important actually, as you get into apps, you'll probably find that quite a useful thing to do. So that really concludes the teaching part of this lecture on variables. You probably think it's been quite in depth, and I think I mentioned at the start, variables are the fundamental of any programming language, so it's really important. And so in many ways we've probably done the hardest part first, which is variables. Lots of different types, different things you can do with them, print them, change the values, etc, etc. So quite a serious lecture, but it's done at the beginning of this course, so the rest of it should be probably a bit easier. So now then, it's time for your challenge.